individually, as I talk to people throughout the county, everybody has a different question and everybody has a different concern about election and election integrity. So from the perspective of the Election Bureau, I wanted to walk you through how we look at it and how we enforce and have a process of integrity so that the voters have some confidence that the elections are being held legitimately and they're not being influenced by outside parties. That's what I hope to give you tonight, and with that, I think I'll start with the slide presentation. And so, elementary-wise types of elections, there's 3 different types of elections. I think everybody knows this. There's closed primary elections. If you came to the League of Women's Voters presentation last month, Jack came and talked about why there's closed primaries in Pennsylvania and the antiquated legislation in the state of Pennsylvania. And so what a closed primary is really you only get to vote for your party candidates, and it's the major parties. So there's major parties, there's minor parties. The major parties in the state of Pennsylvania are recognized as the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. More recently, the Libertarian Party has become a recognized major party in Pennsylvania simply based on the number of votes that are cast for Libertarians and the number of registered Libertarians. Elections themselves, in the odd years, those are called municipal elections, and in the even years, 2022, 2024, they're considered federal elections. So every 4 years you realize that the presidential election's held every 4 years, and there's one coming up in 2024. So this year is a municipal election. What that simply means is that there's all of your local races are on there. You have your county candidate offices, your magisterial district judge offices. You have some statewide and county judge offices on there, as well as all your municipality officers, your townships, your boroughs, and your cities. There's 7 cities in Westmoreland County. They all have their candidates on the ballot coming up in 2023. And then the boroughs and the school districts also have all of their candidates. So the ballot this election is going to be rather lengthy. It's front and back. Please, when you vote, make sure you vote on the front and vote on the back. Every single ballot has races on front and back this election. And the primary elections usually every third Tuesday in May, except in presidential years. They move that up to or back to the 4th Tuesday of April. So in open general elections, those are where you get the vote for any party candidate. That is what happens after the primary election. So the election in the fall is always an open general election, and the third party candidates and or the minor party candidates can do nomination papers to get themselves put on the November ballot and contest any of the races that were won in the primary by your major party candidates, being the Republican and Democratic Party. And that general election is always held by election code in Pennsylvania the 1st Tuesday after the 1st Monday in November. And then the third type of elections are special elections. So every once in a while, someone in office will either resign from office or unfortunately pass away in office, and then there's a special election held. And so that happens so often. In 2020, there was a special election. But those are your 3 types of elections. Very elementary 101. Next slide, please. There's 3 ways to vote. You have your traditional voting at the polling location. That's called election day voting. So you go to the poll, and I'll walk you through what happens at the poll, and I think that will answer maybe half of the room's questions. I'm sorry if you back up. The second way to vote is absentee ballot voting. Absentee ballot voting has been around for a long, long time. So it requires you to have a reason to be absent from your precinct. You're either working out of your municipality, you're not in your municipality on election day, or you have some physical impairment that prevents you from coming to the polling precinct. And then the third type of voting is mail-in ballots. So mail-in ballots sort of started in late 2019. The legislature passed legislation allowing mail-in ballots, and I'll walk you through that process as well. Next slide. So if we start with your precinct voting, everybody's probably ever voted in a precinct. I doubt anyone's always voted absentee or mail-in. It's here this evening. But you go into your precinct, there's poll books there. You have a judge of election, you have poll workers there, you sign into a poll book. The machine inspector or the minority inspector or majority inspector will take you over to a voting machine and you vote your ballot on a voting machine. So I'm going to walk you through the voting machine, how those machines work this evening, and what those are all referred to. And then also at your precinct, if for some reason you're not eligible to vote on the machine for a number of different reasons we'll talk about, you can always vote a provisional ballot at the precinct. Next. So we'll start with the ballot marking device. This is very important for everybody to know. This device here does nothing more than mark your ballot card for you. So you create your own ballot on this ballot marking device. It's not connected to the internet, contrary to popular belief. There's no connection whatsoever. But we burn sticks that have all the ballots. The way our process works, we have a vendor called ES&S. They have competition throughout the United States. You've heard of Dominion as one of their competitors, and there's a number of other competitors there. But we selected ES&S. They're in 37 counties in the state of Pennsylvania. And they're our equipment provider, and they're our resource for our elections. So these are ES&S machines, and if you hit the next slide, it starts the power of the machine on, and the screen like that comes up to begin voting. Insert your ballot card, next. And that's just a close-up of that with a blank ballot card. Your poll worker will give you a blank ballot card that you will put into the bottom right of that machine, next. And that's just me. And then the first screen that comes up is to select a ballot. You're going to select whether or not it's a Republican ballot or the Democratic ballot. So our ballots are set up two different ways. We have the Democrats all on one ballot in the open primary, and we have the Republicans all on one ballot. So based on your party of when you signed in at the poll book, the judge of election then says whether or not to the poll worker to get the Democratic or Republican ballot on the machine for you. So that's the first step that you'll see next. Second step is just confirm that you're in the right precinct. When I put this slide together, I simply, and I'm sorry they're a little fuzzy, it's hard to take a picture with an electronic machine, but I just picked Adamsburg Borough because that's our very first precinct in Westmoreland County. So first you'll pick your party, then you'll make sure that it's your precinct, and then the next slide that comes up will tell you to vote for a candidate. This is where we're getting a lot of misinformation on. The last 3 elections, voters have said their votes have flipped from Democrat to Republican or vice versa. Okay? We've determined how that can appear to happen, but it's very important when that candidate's name comes up on these machines that you click on the candidate's name. If you click in this checkbox, the way it's set up on your ballot screen, that checkbox is so close to the candidate box above it that if you have a fat finger, you're using bifocals, you just mishit it, just like when you use your phone to print out a text message and you misspell something. If you hit that wrong, it will go to the candidate above that. So in a general election, right now, because our governor of Pennsylvania is a Democrat, all the Democrats are listed by whatever your sitting governor party affiliation is, sits first on the ballot. So in November of last year, all the Democrats were at top and the Republicans were below. So when you went, the majority of people that have, I think there's a couple factual things. The Democrats lean more toward mail-in ballots than the Republicans do, although I see that trend changing a little bit. And the Republicans typically vote at the precinct more than they use the mail-in ballot process. And so Republican would come, they would pick their candidate that was below the Democrat, and they would try to hit that checkbox. That checkbox is very small on their computer screen. And it would hit the line right at the top because it's right up there like a postage stamp. Opposite side, of course. And it would bring up the Republican candidate. And these people were convinced that the machines were flipping, that they were pushing on the candidate's name. So we did many, many tests of the system. and that is actually, we are able to reproduce that. I believe I showed Pam that and Jennifer.
I'm a judge of election. I actually had several people,
Fantastic.
and I watched them do it, and that's exactly what happened. They were hitting right in between the two.
Wait, are we doing anything to fix that?
So this is,
Use more space, give us fat fingered people a chance to get it right?
there's a couple things. Thanks for asking, Bob. So this is firmware from ES&S, our vendor. So we asked them, hey, can you remove that checkbox? Because we really just determined this last year during the election cycle. And we showed them what was happening, and they acknowledged that, yeah, that could happen. So we asked them to remove the checkbox. The problem with removing the checkbox is you got to upgrade the firmware. So the firmware is national wide. They don't want to update their firmware just for an individual county. So they're looking at doing a software upgrade. It starts with the number 9, whatever the number was. And so we anticipate in 2024 that checkbox may go away nationwide on all ES&S machines. But until they decide to change that firmware and do that upgrade, I'm just telling you, if you click on the name like the instruction says, you can't make that vote flip. You can't. But in 2024, if a Republican sitting governor is here, then all the Democrats will be complaining that their votes flip to Republicans. So every 4 years, that cycle has the potential to change. So yeah, we asked them if we could do that. We could invest in an upgrade right now, individually for Westmoreland County. It's $75 a machine at 908 machines that we have. And what we chose to do was let's educate this election. Let's not change anything this cycle. If ES&S is going to make a change in 2024, we'll be part of that change in 2024. The other thing we asked for, as you suggested, Bob, is to increase the size of the screens themselves. So there's a button at the top right hand of each of the screens. You can click on that button and you can change the size of that screen as you're standing there voting.
We've done that for people who have a little bit more visual impairment. You can make it pretty big.
So you can actually fit a fist in that square now instead of just a finger. But I wanted to really stress that because we heard so much of that. So make sure you click the candidate's name and not the checkbox next to it. So this is a ballot for Adamsburg precinct. Very hard to read from here, but these are your races. You always have your state races first, then your county races, and then your municipal races. And then if you flip the slide, it'll take you over to the back. I'm sorry, it'll take you to write-in. If you ever wanted to write in a candidate's name, say you don't like who's running for office or there is no candidate in a certain office, which are a lot of municipal races that have no candidates this election, you can write in someone's name. When you click on write-in, same as when you click on a candidate's name, click on the word write-in, you can type in the name of who you want to vote for. Okay? Next screen. And this is the back side of the ballot. And so this year, pay attention to the backside, those are all your school races basically. The rest of the offices are all fitting on the first page. If it's a large school district, Ligonier Valley School District, Hemphill Area School District, they have a lot of candidates, so they're all on the back of your ballot. Next slide. So once you pick your candidates, you have to review your selection. Obviously, when I did this, I didn't make any selections, and that's what is reflected. But once you pick those candidates, you have not cast a vote yet. All you did was pick a candidate to print out on a card of who you intend to vote for. So you would have names in those slots, or you could vote for nobody, you know, just like I did with no selection. Next. And that just shows the rest of the races on that precinct. And so once you've picked your candidates, print ballot screen will come up. This is where you want to print your ballot. You want to review your ballot. Once you print that ballot, you can't change that ballot back on that machine at that time. So, next screen. You will actually print your ballot, and this is what will come up. I had no selection. It'll bring up all your races, bring up your precinct, and whether it was Democratic or Republican. The barcode at the top on this ballot simply contains the information that says that's Adamsburg Borough Precinct, and that's a Democratic ballot. If you were to select names, which I said again, I only picked no selection. If you were to pick names, You will see additional barcodes under that for each race that you pick a candidate in or you write a name in. You have a smaller, not as wide barcode that has that information in there. So that's what'll print out. You still have not cast a vote. Those are called ballot marking devices. All they do is mark down what you want to vote for. That will print out when you click on print ballot. Next. You're gonna then take it to another machine in your precinct. You've all done that, right? So the other machine is called a tabulating machine. So it's a DS200. There's different speeds to them. There's a DS200, 450, 850, and ES&S coming out with a 950, which will have that change we talked about in 2024. So this is where your vote's going to count. All you did so far was print out who you intend to vote for. So you go to this machine, the judge of election will have his poll worker guide you over to the machine, next screen. You will put that into the DS200 tabulating machine, and next. It will go through and it will count your vote at that point. So there's no connection, and you can physically see that when you're in the precinct. There's no connection from the ballot marking device to the vote tabulating machine. All you do is create a ballot, and you can walk out and never vote. Your vote, everything you pick doesn't count to anything until you put it in that DS200 vote tabulating machine. So that was the whole, yes.
So, Greg, the other thing with the tabulating machine is it drops the paper ballot into a secure box so that there's a paper trail of every vote.
That's a very good point. So, yeah, the Pennsylvania legislation requires anyone using electronic voting machines to have a paper trail of that vote. So when you put it in that machine, it counts that vote. That vote goes on a thumb drive that's in the machine. There's 2 thumb drives in the machine. One is the one that counts your vote, and the other's a backup. In case the judge of election loses that thumb drive, bringing it back to the central location at the end of the night, we have a backup that still has the votes on it. So the backup thumb drive is locked in a case. The keys are very secure. The thumb drive that records that vote, we have the electronic portion of that, and as Becky said, the paper ballot goes into a blue bin that's locked in a cabinet underneath the DS200 machine. Those blue bins get delivered back to the Election Bureau the night of election. The judges are required and paid handsomely to bring those thumb drives back.
There are donuts.
To bring the thumb drives back and the blue bins. So those are under chain of custody. And I'll get into a little more of the integrity part of who all takes oath and who's affirmed and required to follow the chain of custody process. But the judges bring all that stuff back at the end of the night. The voting machines will sit there for 5, 6, 7 days until our vendor comes and picks them up. But there won't be any blue bins in it that have the ballot, and there won't be any thumb drives in there that they can access. So any other questions on voting at the precinct from high-level voting at the precinct standpoint? The second type of voting is the issuance of a mail-in or absentee ballot. So the way this process works is that every February we're required by law to send a letter out to all voters that have either voted via absentee or mail-in ballot in the previous election cycle, or have sent in an application to us saying that they want to vote by mail-in or absentee ballot. So we send these letters out in January of each year. Last week of January, beginning of February. And then the voter fills that application out, sends it back to the Election Bureau. When that application comes back, it's checked for the name of record, meaning what is the voter's actual official voting record stored at the Election Bureau at the courthouse, say their name is, what's their birth date, what's their address. It also requests their driver's license ID, because earlier we talked about IDs, so we do request the last 4 digits, the driver's license number or your PennDOT ID card number, and then the last 4 digits of your Social Security. And then they have to sign that declaring that they're eligible to vote and that the information is accurate. That comes to our office. Our registrars will take that information, they'll review that application, they'll verify that the voter's eligible. There's 4 different classifications that can be assigned to a voter. It would be an active voter, it means they're eligible, they're active, they voted within the time frame required. They could be inactive, they could be canceled, they could have passed away. There's other options there. So an inactive voter is someone that's not voted in the last 5 years. If you haven't voted in 5 years, your status goes to inactive. After that point, that's what I'll call a soft cancel. You're still in the system. You're just not eligible to vote. If you decide in the 6th year to go vote, when you get to the poll precinct, you're going to be required to show ID to prove that's who you are, and then the judge will allow you to sign the poll book and you could vote at the machine. After that fact, if you don't vote after 5 years and you've missed 2 federal election cycles in a row consecutively, you are canceled completely. You have to reapply for registration. You'll always stay in the voter system for a historic record, but you will be marked as inactive, canceled. So our registrars verify that information. For the last 3 weeks of, I know Jay personally, I like to hang out at the club he hangs out at. I haven't been to the club in 3 weeks because every weekend I've been doing voter registrations. We had 4 new registrars come on board when I started. 3 of them have left because they found jobs that pay more. We even increased the salary for these positions. So we're having some turnover there. So I pitched in and did some of these for the last 3 weekends. So you verify all that information, and sometimes it doesn't match up. If it doesn't match up, we need to reach out to the voter and say, hey, your birth date on your application doesn't match what your voting record says. What's the deal? If they give us a valid information, say, oh, I just typed it wrong, or I did this wrong, you know, we take that information. We may ask them to come back in and re-register to prove who they are, make sure that we're accepting only valid applications. Once we process that application and we've verified the last 4 of their social security as well as their driver's license, their birth date, their request, whether it was out mail-in application or an absentee application, and that they signed it declaring they're eligible to vote and this information is true and correct, we will process that application. We'll put it into what's called the State Uniform Register Elector System, Registry of Elector System. It's a statewide system. All 67 counties in Pennsylvania use the same system. So the only thing centralized in the election process at the state level is the voting records themselves of every voter in the state of Pennsylvania. Each individual county has the ability to run elections how they see fit, as long as they're within the parameters of the election code, Act 77, Act 88, whatever statute is involved in that. So there is some leeway how counties run their elections, but the one thing that stays constant is that the state keeps a centralized list of all voters in the state of Pennsylvania. So we put that application into that system, and that system will, the state will then re-verify the driver's license, social security number, and the information on there. A lot of questions come, well, what if someone sends in 2 applications? Once that application is put into the system by a registrar, it locks that as you've applied for a mail-in ballot. If we receive a second application from a voter, when we go to put that information in, the system itself will say, this is a duplicate application. They've already applied before. What has changed on that? So we'll go through the process with the voter and say, why did you apply a second time? What's been happening the last couple elections is there's a lot of groups that are putting out the drive to vote, okay? So they're getting registrations, they're called street lists, which is a public information list that they can obtain from any election bureau of all the people, and they're reaching out to them and sending applications on their own as a third party, saying, hey, we want you to vote, fill out an application for mail-in absentee ballot. Some of the voters forget that they already filled one out, so they send another one in. But that won't go into the system. You can't have 2 applications in the system. It'll block it. So we'll do the research, we'll talk to the voter, and we may have to have them re-register as well. So on election day, when you get to the precinct, if someone applied for a mail-in or absentee ballot, that judge of election will receive a list of everybody that applied for one. So if someone comes to the precinct and wants to vote on the machine, their name won't show up in the poll book. It'll say that they've received the mail-in or absentee ballot, so they're not eligible to vote at the voting machine without surrendering that ballot to the judge of elections, and then that judge can allow them to vote on the machine. And if they don't surrender that mail-in ballot that was sent to them or the absentee ballot, they are allowed to vote provisionally. Those all get taken care of at a later date. Next slide. Thankfully, not all the slides are that long, or we'll be here for 3 hours. Absentee ballot voting.
Greg, excuse me.
Yes.
Those restrictions and requirements you just reviewed were only for absentee ballots, not for the universal mail-in ballots. Am I correct?
No, it's for both. So the only difference between a mail-in ballot and absentee ballot on the application, there's one extra paragraph in there. It's either paragraph 6 or 7. If you requested an absentee ballot, you have to list the reason of why you wanted an absentee ballot. So that absentee ballot will either have 2 things on it. 1, you're out of the municipality, or 2, you have some physical impairment, and then you have to describe that. So that's a good point that you brought up. When our registrars are processing that application, that goes into the system a little differently than the universal mail-in ballot goes in. So it's absentee, then we have to pick a reason why that they chose absentee, and whether it's out of the municipality, they have some impairment, that gets entered into the system a little differently. I talk predominantly more about mail-ins because it's like 90% mail-ins, 10% absentee anymore. If you remember prior to
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
The universal ballots don't require any of that.
They don't require that, you're exactly right, but for years and years and years, absentee ballots have always been out there.
Right.
And so mail-in is just an easier application than having to explain why you need an absentee ballot, but it is predominantly taken over the absentee. People that used to get absentee ballots now just want mail-in ballots because nobody wants to disclose their physical ailment. So we have a very small number, 10% of absentee ballots versus 90% of mail-in ballots. But your point, Bob, is very good, and I appreciate you bringing that up. You have to give a reason for that, and on the universal, you don't have to give a reason. And that's what this says here. You need an excuse. You're out of the precinct, you have a medical issue, and anybody that is uniformed military or overseas has the right to still vote in federal elections and or in some cases the municipal elections. Those are absentee ballots as well. Those are not universal mail-in ballots. They're not eligible for universal mail-in ballots. Next slide is this is the ballot itself, or not the ballot, it's the instructions for filling out the ballot. You will receive an official ballot. We will send that to you. It will have the races just like you saw on the screen. It'll have the candidates' names. You will select with dark ink, fill in the oval, write in a name if you want to write in someone's name for an office. You'll take that ballot and you'll put it in what's called an inner secrecy envelope. That inner secrecy envelope is a plain white envelope, and all it says on it is official election ballot. Okay? You take that envelope and you put it in the return envelope. We pay the postage on the return envelopes. So on that return envelope, you have to fill out the back of that envelope. You have to sign it, and you have to put the current date on it that you signed it. Next slide. That's what the official election ballot looks like. That's called the secrecy envelope. I don't know why they call it secrecy other than it keeps your vote secret. That's the intent of it. But nowhere on it does it say secrecy envelope. It says official election ballot. And that confuses people because the law will tell me I can't accept that ballot if there's any identifying marks on that envelope that show who you are as a voter. Some people will take their name and their address that they put on their regular mail and put it on that and then put it into the declaration outer envelope. Some people will write their name on it. If they put any marks that identify you as a voter, I'm not by law allowed to accept and count that vote. If you don't put your ballot in this envelope and you put just your ballot in the declaration envelope, the outer envelope, and you skip that, I'm not allowed to count that vote because by law you have to put it in that envelope. So remember, use the envelopes. That's called a secrecy envelope. Next slide. And that's what the return envelope looks like. We call that a declaration envelope because if you hit the next slide, on the back of it, you're declaring that you're eligible to vote in this election and this information is true. You need to sign this block. I cannot count your vote if there's not a signature there. Okay? No signature, I'm not allowed to count. Today's date. You have to put today's date. A lot of people write their birthday in there. A lot of people will transpose a number. There's a number of dates that are written like 11/2/2042 instead of 20 whatever. If there's a date in there prior to the latest legislation or the latest litigation, I should say, we would accept that if there was a date in there. It didn't matter. But then that was challenged in court and litigated, and now the date has to be fallen within a range. And so now we look at dates as either no date. If there's no date on it, we have to set it aside by law. That's the current state law. If it's an incorrect date, and that incorrect date would be not within the window of the first time we made a ballot available for this election through election day, if that date's not in there, that's considered an incorrect date. I have to set that ballot aside. So it's very important that you sign it and put today's date on. Next slide. This is simply, I showed you the illustration of how to do that. Seal your voted ballot in the white inner secrecy envelope that indicates official election ballot. Do not write on that or mark anything on that envelope. Seal that envelope in the pre-addressed return envelope, sign date and return to us, and put today's signature or today's date under your signature. Next. Mail-in ballot, same type of thing. Without the reason for being absent, that you had a medical excuse or you're out of your voting precinct. You request the ballot the same as you do for an absentee ballot. This is called no excuse voting. You don't have to give an excuse. If you don't want to vote at your polling location, you still want to vote, this is the application you're going to fill out. Started in 2019, 2020. Lessons learned simply means 2020 was the first year in the general presidential election that every election bureau in the state of Pennsylvania was overwhelmed with mail-in ballots because of the pandemic going on at the same time. And it was a mess. And you've read about that and read about it and read about it. There's been legislation, litigation, court cases, all about it. As the legislature in the state of Pennsylvania continues to evolve and some of these things get set in stone, there's signs of improvement. They know that there was a lot of mistakes. There was no real check and balance system other than, you know, hey, these are new, you got to accept them, and now they're setting criteria for proper acceptance. Next slide.
Excuse me,
Yes,
Gary, the first point there says that the voter has to request that ballot?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was only for absentee ballots. I
No.
thought universal mail-in ballots, somehow somebody chooses to send them all to some precinct or some group, and they just go.
No,
That's not true?
that's not true. You have to fill out an application for an absentee and a mail-in, the voter themselves. So, and it's a letter, it says, if you want to be a permanent mail-in or absentee voter, please understand, I can't explain to Pennsylvania legislator, permanent only means permanent for 1 year. You still have to apply each year thereafter. It's permanent for 1 year only. You will get that mail-in absentee ballot for the primary and for the general election, but you have to request it. And so we send, I'm sorry?
And they screwed that one up too. Last year, they had to send a letter out and tell us that we had to re-request because they screwed
Yeah,
that.
so that says improvement, doesn't say perfect.
Correct.
But that's statewide, your point's well taken. When you do it through the system, you know, there are mistakes that happen there, and some voters may be disenfranchised, but it's not a large
Okay,
number.
You're saying there is no situation where the Bureau of Elections just sends out
No.
100,000 ballots to some precinct because somebody requested them?
No, but we do send out the end of last week in January, first week in February, 53,000 letters to people that have done it before in the
Okay,
previous election
that's-
cycle.
That's
And
understandable.
that starts the process. The
Yeah.
voter has to fill it out and send it back.
Okay.
And then we verify it, we approve it, we accept it, then you'll receive a ballot. Yes.
Also, point taken for a mail-in ballot, you either have to put your driver's license number in, your ID number in, and if you don't have either one, you have to prove your signature. Because my stepson did not have an ID. He actually had to send in his signature to get his mail-in ballot approved.
It's 100% correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to put one of those numbers in. so that we can verify that that's an eligible voter or the voter. You've heard of ballot harvesting, of
Yeah,
turning
we
in a
asked
bunch
about
of
that.
ballots at
How-
one time. That is preventing ballot application harvesting. So you know that the voter themselves put it in, they put that information in, and anybody can fill that application out, but it has to match what's on the voter's record. If that.
But you're saying there is such a thing as ballot harvesting going on?
No, I said you've heard about ballot
Yeah.
harvesting. I'm not up here acknowledging anything, Bob.
Okay. I think I've witnessed it, however. If you've ever gone to a nursing home during election season, and we all have loved ones in nursing homes. My mother lived to be 100, God rest her soul, but she was in the nursing home for probably last 25 years of her life, and I saw it on several occasions. Usually it was the director of activities, the guys and gals that schedule the bingo games and all that sort of stuff, would come around during election time with ballots and get the residents to vote. Now, to me, it was kind of crazy because a lot of those people couldn't even think.
Yeah.
I mean, they were, vegetables, but they were somehow voting, and they were somehow putting X's for their signatures. And I was wondering how in the world that could be legal.
So that all starts in the application process. The voter has to fill out the application in order to ever receive the ballot. So when they fill out the application, or the people in the nursing home filling everything out except the signature for their patient or client, I can't tell you that. I don't know. But I can tell you that we look at the signature to make sure the signature matches the voter's signature that's on record.
You can sign with an X if you have a valid person signing for you. So if you're in a nursing home and you cannot sign your signature, if somebody that works for the nursing home is willing to validate that you did, that is your X. If they are willing to take an oath on that voter ballot, that is your X, they witnessed you X that themselves, then they can sign that for you, but they are also taking an oath for that vote, saying that they saw you put that X in that placement.
That's
That
correct.
That sounds wonderful. I just don't think it happens.
And I get your point. Things are improving, but it's a process that's new to everybody. Is it a way to harvest, which I did not acknowledge? I just said you've all heard of it. I have my own thoughts, Bob, and you have your thoughts. And here's what I want to tell you, and this is what I told Pam, and this is the whole reason why I came to begin with. There are in my opinion, there are instances that are questionable. But I can tell you from my experience in there, and granted, you don't think I have a lot of experience, but from my experience, it's not widespread. It's not what some people make it out to be. But are there situations that someone could do that maliciously, but they are subject to a penalty
But
of
you're only
$10,000?
speaking for Westmoreland County.
That's correct.
I mean, we don't know what goes on in
Yeah, you hear
Philadelphia and
Maricopa
Allegheny
County, Arizona,
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's stick to Westmoreland County. I know Greg has a lot to go through yet.
Yeah, I
and
Oh, I'll stay all
We're
night.
talking about some very isolated cases,
Okay.
and which, from your own admission, go back 25 years. So there's nothing new in whatever was going on at nursing homes.
That doesn't make it right.
I'm not saying it does, but I'm trying to keep on topic for this presentation.
We can't correct what happened 25 years ago. All we can do is start with what we have now and say, if you see that happening, you have the right to let the Election Bureau know so that it can be investigated.
Yeah, you have that right to do that, and you also have, so the Election Bureau doesn't do actual investigations, but the election code requires that the county's district attorney handle all investigations. There's some conflict of interest, that gets moved from the county district attorney to the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania. So if you have any allegations that you feel are legitimate, That is absolutely correct with avenue to take. You could start with the Election Bureau. I will take it right to the district attorney's office. We have had challenges for a number of things, and right now is your period of time. Any voter that filled out an application for a mail-in or absentee ballot, if you don't believe they're eligible, you can challenge their eligibility up until May 9th. That's the last day at 5 p.m. on Friday, May 9th, to challenge anyone's eligibility to vote in this election. Next slide. And it's just a repeat of the absentee because it's the exact same process. Next. Same secrecy envelope. Next. Same returned envelope on the front. And we'll stop here. The only difference between an absentee and mail-in ballot for our own purpose in the Election Bureau is that letter M up in the top right corner, so that we know it's a mail-in ballot and not an absentee. So absentee ballots, we've had blank ones and we also have A ones. But we know if it's an M, it's a mail-in ballot. That's what was sent. We verify with the list of people that applied for mail-in ballots and make sure that is someone that applied for mail-in ballot. That's the only difference you'll see between mail-in and absentee as far as voting, putting it in the secrecy envelope and sending it in to us. On the application, the only difference, as we talked about, is you have to put an excuse on an absentee application. Next slide. And this is just the same instructions that we went over on the, I took this in case anybody wanted to read it later at night, so you can read the same thing, but next slide. Reasons why a mail-in or absentee ballot may be set aside or rejected. Westmoreland County has no curing of ballot policy in place, and some counties do. So what that means is when the ballot comes back, mail-in or absentee ballot, if there's a discrepancy on it, some counties will reach out to the voter and say, hey, you didn't fill your ballot declaration envelope out correctly, there's an issue with it, come in and fix it so that we can accept it. Westmoreland County does not do that. We accept them as they are turned in. There's two sides to that. You can cure, you cannot cure. Our position in Westmoreland County is not cure. So we can't fix them, people turn them in. What we do is take and we look at the dates on them. Incorrect dates, no dates. Those get segregated, they have to be set aside, as we talked about. If you don't have a date on it, I can't count it. If it has an incorrect date that's not in that window of time, I can't count it. Those get set aside. In the general election of November of 2022, there were 318 mail-in/absentee ballots that were rejected. 226 because they didn't have that white official election envelope in it. 24 of them were rejected because there was an identifying mark on that white secrecy envelope that identified who the voter was. 27 of them had no signature. I can't take it without a signature. 4 of them had incorrect signature, and 32 of them had switch signature. And what that means is your name's pre-printed on the return envelope, and you have to sign it. And I can't catch all of them, but some of them are apparent. If a husband and wife are having coffee in the morning and they decide to fill their ballots out together, they have signed the opposite envelopes. There could be Bob Smith and Jane Smith, and you clearly can read Jane Smith's signature on Bob Smith's envelope, and vice versa. That's what a switch signature is, or an incorrect signature. If you can clearly read the signature and it says John Doe, and the voter's name on that envelope says Matthew McConaughey, or whatever that guy's name is, you can clearly see that that's incorrect. But we don't check all the signatures, because some of them we can't read half the writing. Okay. Date with no signature, once again, that's rejected because it didn't have the signature, but they gave a date. And then in November, one had passed away prior to the election, and we caught that through our canvassing, pre-canvass process during the day. Next slide. Integrity along the way. Everyone involved takes an oath and signs an affidavit. For that handsome sum of money Paul gets, he turns his life over. It starts with us in the Election Bureau. If I don't have staff that want to be honest, we'll never have integrity. Everybody in our office is pre-selected and picked based on them being capable, honest, trustworthy, and I still don't trust anybody because of my facility maintenance background. I never trust a contractor. But we all have to take an oath. We all have to swear that we're going to do this. If we're not going to take that oath and we're not going to swear that we're going to be honest and correct, then we shouldn't be working there. So we pride ourselves on that. That's my job to monitor the staff and make sure they're doing everything legitimately. So we have an office manager, we have 4 registrars. I have a voting system coordinator who has 2 employees that report to him, the election office coordinator and the election warehouse manager. And then we have a quality assurance manager that's a new position that we just added last year. Next slide. And it continues at the precinct. The judge of election takes an oath and an affidavit. The majority inspector, minority inspector, machine clerks, the poll workers. They all want to be a part of it, and they all have to sign an oath and take an affidavit that they're going to be on this. Next slide. One of the ways to enforce that is that there's more than these 6, only 6 on this slide. There is a lot of processes we have to do in the election bureau to make sure that the integrity is there. We have to approve the registration applications under a state statute. We have to do a cleansing of our records of canceling deceased voters. We have to remove voters from our records that have changed their address or moved out of county or moved out of state. We have to remove voters that have not voted in 5 years. They still stay in the system listed inactive. They're not literally removed, but it's a process to make sure that the integrity is there. The ballots that come in all have to be secured and safe kept. So those are locked in my office, and we store them in cabinets and locked cages. And then we do the enforcement of voter ID provisions by the state statute. We have to do that. And then on the day of election, we pre-canvass and canvass that. What that simply means is that's the very first time we look at those mail-in absentee ballots is election morning at 7 o'clock. We set up teams of 16 people along 4 tables. 2 people sit at the front. They get the envelope. They make sure that information matches the list of people that we developed that sent in their application. We make sure it has a date, some date, or a signature. We do that check right at the very first station. If it has an incorrect date or no date, it gets set aside. If it doesn't have a signature, it gets set aside at that process. If it makes it through that check, it goes to the next set of people. The next set of people put that envelope into an automatic letter opener. It opens that envelope. It goes to the next set of people. Those people will open the envelope, pull the secrecy envelope out. If there's no secrecy envelope, that ballot gets set aside. If there's a secrecy envelope right there and it's marked, it gets set aside. If it's a clean secrecy envelope, that envelope goes to the next person. They have an automatic envelope opener. They open that up. That's the first time that ballot gets exposed after it's been through 3 separate groups of 2 people. Once that ballot is opened up, that ballot gets sent down. It goes through 4 people to process it, set it aside by precinct number, so that when we start putting them through the faster tabulating machines in the election or in the public meeting rooms of the courthouse, the bulk of the mail-in ballots, all of them actually come there. So we got to count them faster than like your individual ballot at the precinct that you're putting in a slower machine. Just count 1 ballot till the next voter comes in. We have to do that. We're required by law to do these 6 things. Next slide. That's just a picture of the locked cages. They're stayed in. All the ballots go in. Next picture. And then this continues. So in order to get the grant money that we get, $1.2 million, we have to do these things by law. We can't start looking at those ballots until 7 a.m. on Monday or on election day. And that's that process I just walked you through. That's called pre-canvass. So we process the ballots, but we can't release the vote counts until 8 p.m. election day. That's called canvassing. So there's a pre-canvass process. We go through all them ballots. We're not even done with pre-canvass when canvass starts. Canvass is when those ballots were allowed to release the number of vote counts for candidates. We like to get those vote counts out by 8:30, 8:45, get the first round out there so all the pollsters can figure out who's going to win and who's not going to win. We have to do that. And then by midnight, we have to post how many of these mail-in absentee ballots we received. We have to certify to the state DCD that we've completed the voter list maintenance programs. We've taken the dead people off. We've taken the out-of-county people off, the out-of-state people. We've made inactive people that haven't voted 5 years. And then the outcome of any post-election audit is also required as part of this grant. So we have to do some audits, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. How bad am I on time?
It's 7:30 now.
Oh, Anybody wanna leave one time? Next slide. How long do we have the room running?
Well, the library closes at 8. So.
Oh, okay. We're never gonna make it. So just real quick, this is just a review. Voter maintenance activities to keep the integrity. Those are the programs by statute we have to do. Those are the things I was just explaining to you. We do logic and accuracy testing, which Fred attends. He's like one of the only people that come down to our election warehouse. All of our machines are down there, the ballot marking devices, the tabulating machines. We do logic and accuracy testing on that. What that means is we create a ballot, we put the ballot in the machine, we make sure the ballot works, we make sure the screen reads the races, we make sure all of our races are right, all the candidates' names are spelled right. That's all part of that process. Mail-in absentee ballots have barcodes. When those come into the Election Bureau, we scan them. We have a barcode reader. We scan that code, and that says this person that applied for a mail-in or absentee ballot actually sent it back to us. Doesn't count their vote because we don't open the envelopes till Election Day, but it says we received that back. And then during pre-canvass and absentee, we weed out those ones that have marked secrecy, envelopes, no date, whatever. Next. The process of checks and balance continues. This is what we use during the Election Day. It's just a faster machine. It'll sort those ballots out between overvotes, undervotes, and correct votes. That's just based on the number. So that tallies up the votes all day long. We put 25, 30,000 mail-in absentee ballots through those by 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And all those numbers are stored on the thumb drive, just like at the election precinct on the smaller machines. Next. These are the thumb drives. They're in a secure case with keys. Like I said, one goes in the voting tabulating machine and the backup goes in there as well. Next one. So when you get to the precinct, first thing that they do is they'll have you sign the poll book. For us to make sure nobody votes twice. You can vote as many times as you want, but only one vote will ever count. First of all, you can't vote as many times as you want, but if you did, if you timed everything correctly, you could probably get 2 votes. But you're only ever going to count one because first of all, when your mail-in absentee ballot comes in, we scan it. That prevents all other votes. You will not show up in that poll book. Judge of election will say, no, you send in a mail-in ballot. We already received it. You can't vote here unless you surrender that ballot, and there's a process for that. So if you're eligible to vote here, you're going to sign this. 3 days after the election, we're allowed to canvass the official count. That gives us 3 days to make sure everything else is recorded. Any other method of voting. On day 3, we start scanning these, and if it pops up and says, hey, this person signed the book, and they already sent in a mail-in ballot, it won't accept what they voted on back at the precinct. Their vote won't count for that. Next slide. 3 days after election, we start that process. Military overseas ballots come in for up to 7 days following the election. Voting equipment gets locked down and secured for 20 days after election. Those blue bins, we don't touch those blue bins. Out of the 307 precincts, we don't touch the tabulating machines. They're locked at our warehouse for 20 days under state law. There is an exception to that I'll get to real quick. And then the results are unofficial during the 2-week period after the election as we go through the pre-certification process. And then 3 weeks later, we hit the final certification. And only one vote counts. Next. Integrity along the way, post-election audits. We do 2 audits. We're required by law to do 2 audits. 2% of the total votes cast, we have to figure out what the total votes cast for election was, take 2% of that. Then we have to look at our precincts, randomly picked precincts, that add up to 2% of the total vote or over 2% of the total vote. And we hand count all those ballots. We're required to do that. There's a risk limiting audit that's newer, that's state driven. The state will reach out to every county and say, hey, we picked a batch. What a batch is, as we canvass those mail-in absentee ballots and they go through and they're set aside by precinct, the precinct's basically a batch. And they randomly pick batches, 5, 6 batches, say you gotta hand count those 5 or 6 batches, report back that count to us. So we do post-elections audits, 2 of them require each election. Next. And there are challenges that can be made during the election cycle. Right now, petition nomination for candidates has been challenged for the county commissioner race. That's actually going through the court system as we speak. But people can challenge Petition or paper nominations. Petitions are for the major party, papers are for the minority party, third parties. They can challenge the number of signatures on a petition. The party of the signer, if a Democrat's in the primary circulating a petition for a Republican, you can challenge that. You can challenge the date that the voter writes for their date that they signed it. You can challenge for their campaign finance reports and their eligibility. Write-in names, they can be challenged as well. And then we are required to do recounts if someone petitions the court to say, we want to have a recount of this precinct. Next. I sped that out.
Whoa.
Sorry. Any other questions?